we make a big thing on the vehicle details page of the spec that's attached to that vehicle, because that is massive added value for the consumer, which they don't really end up paying for. You know, we might be able to achieve another £500 for that car, but again, we've got to be cost competitive on the likes of Auto Trader and obviously eBay Motors. And I suppose, other than that, we put a lot of information around how we prepare that vehicle to give confidence in the preparation standard. And I think what we've got to remember now, even more now, even though it's been important for the last 3-4 years, is we've got to get that customer engaged in that vehicle before they'll make contact with us. You know, the old school theory was put as little out there as possible so the consumer's got to ring. Well, that doesn't work. You know, that hasn't worked for 5 years. We need to be putting, if they're comparing our car with a competitor's car, we should give that information freely, openly, transparently. Things like service history, things like whether we got the, you know, hashed out logbook V5 so that the consumer knows it's a real car. You know, there's still dealers out there today who will advertise cars they don't own. So it's all around the provenance of the vehicle, making sure we've got all that covered off through CAP HPI checks, and just presenting that. And our view's always been that, you know, if you give people that data and that visibility, they will come. You know, build it and they will come. Yeah. I suppose what we have to do, and this is a question I have with the classifieds a lot of the time, is how do we bring that differentiation onto the classified site? Because obviously the start of the funnel is going to be either Google or classified. And through Google, they'll probably end up on a classified channel. So the point of differentiation for us is, what I want classifieds to do is refer that to my VDP on the website as quickly as possible, because that's where I've got the best chance to sell my vehicle. Yeah. If we could find a way to differentiate those cars with high spec versus not high spec, and if you look at things like market value indicators, they're still not there in relation to value in that spec or making that look a more attractive vehicle than the vehicle next to it that is base model derivative. And that's a shortcoming at the moment, and it's something I'd like to see, and probably get Dermot your view on it, how we can start to surface that sort of added value rather than just look at a base price on vehicle.
It's such a good point, isn't it? Because if I'm thinking as a consumer, I'm just not aware of that. I just see 2 listings for a Ford Fiesta or an M5, whatever it might be, and I just pick the one that I like the look of. Dermot, I think, as Neil says, it'd be interesting to know your thoughts on this.
Yeah, just to take that specific thing around market values, we haven't done it on motors because it's hard. Yeah. And it's hard to get it right. And, you know, I think there is utility from a consumer point of view, because, you know, ultimately the basket of goods in terms of the number of cars that people are looking at, there tends to be 3 to 4 that when they get to the final couple of weeks of the decision, they are trading off the merits of 3 or 4 cars, and because they're used vehicles, they're never the same. So Neil's point is exactly right. There's obviously things that matter to some people in terms of features and specs. That's not necessarily easy to visualize in a single icon. And you know, when we were owned by Cox Automotive, you know, we spent loads of time with Kelly Blue Book in the US, who are the founder, you know, they kind of came up with Kelly's price indicator. And look, it remains an area that we seek to try and provide consumer utility, but make sure that we're providing the most relevant and accurate data. So that to Neil's point, if he's sourcing particular vehicles in order to kind of tell that Imperial Cars story, that's reflected in his listings. Because right now, as he says, there might be something in the vehicle description, but his best chance is telling that story on his own website rather than ours. So it remains an area that we seek to investigate. But I think it is also worth just going back to the slightly higher level question of what makes a good listing. I think it is consistency. So, for example, if you were to have a very detailed description about one of your cars and not about another, consumers, I think, instinctively just go, well, what's wrong with that one? Like, you know, I think being consistent and doing things in the same way does allow them to compare in the way that we've just, you know, talked about, trading off a basket of vehicles that might be right for them. Unfortunately, it is probably effort required in every single vehicle in order to make sure that it's consistent. And like, to an extent, you know, just to tell a slightly personal story, my parents, my father's a dentist, right? And he's got a private practice, and my mum ran that private practice until very recently. And, you know, they had a mantra, which is, you know, when the phone rings and it's 7 o'clock on a Friday night, they don't really want to pick up the phone, but the person on the end of it, it's their teeth, and it's the only set of teeth they've got. And it really matters to them. And I think remembering that and trying to get your teams to also buy into that mentality of, it's the only car that this person is looking at. It might be a difficult one for you to sell, or it's been around too long, you don't have much emotional connection with it, but for that person, it's the only car that they're really interested in talking about when they speak to you. So I think that's a very sort of human side of like thinking about the way that you present your vehicles and the way that you try and get your teams to put as much effort into that individual vehicle, because it's right for someone, and that person's going to be interrogating and looking at it, and that they will, it's the most important one to them at that point. So I think ultimately effort gets rewarded in that respect.
Yeah,
I think I'll just pick up on that. You're right there, Dermot. I mean, I think we try and drill into our sales execs and our contact centre staff that, you know, we tend to commoditise the vehicle because it's something we do day in, day out, and we'll sell 60 vehicles a day and we'll talk to 200 people a day about cars, whereas the individual who's ringing us is going to be buying that car once every 3 years. So we have to get our staff to understand that although it's a sausage factory for us, this is a massive experience for the consumer. You know, it's the second most costly purchase they're going to make, assuming they bought a house. So we have to treat every inquiry, and it goes back to whether they're paying £5,000 for that car or £60,000 for that car. That is all the money they've got for a car. So everyone gets treated the same. You know, that's what we preach, and we hope, you know, that the majority of our staff across both those areas have that mentality. So it does go back to the advert, and every car gets the same sort of treatment. Dermot's completely right. We try wherever possible within our photo booths to photo them all at the same angle with the same description. We're merchandising 2,500 cars a month. Most of that has to be automated, but we still bring in all of that spec through API data into the vehicle advert. We use the same photography booths, we use the same cameras, we use the same technology. Whether it is a 5 or 60,000 car, we may just vary the number of images based on what spec's worth photographing, but everything gets treated the same.